All right. Well, that took a little while. I don't know what Anup did here, but it was like a 10-second delay on recording.
Yeah,
So, well, anyways, here we are, Humanize IT podcast, and we have Anup with ThreatMate here to talk to us. He's also another Pitch It contestant, just like Steve Copeland was a few weeks ago. And he's going to talk to us a little bit more about security. And I just thought it was funny that one of the topics he picked was how to offer high margin security services without being an expert. I considered calling it security for idiots, but I thought that might be a little too demeaning and on the nose. So, Anup, tell me a
agree.
little bit about what ThreatMate is and
Sure.
what you bring to the table here.
Yeah, so really simply, ThreatMate is your next generation of vulnerability management services. And we have built out a platform that does continuous threat exposure management, which is a little bit of a mouthful. But really what it means is we look at client networks to find exposures that adversaries look for and exploit. And so the idea is our managed security partners use the ThreatMate platform to find those exposures proactively before the adversary does, and then patch them or mitigate those risks, and therefore keep the bad guys out of their client networks.
Okay. So is it like vulnerability management? Or are you more pen testing or what is
Yeah,
this?
all that and more. So that's why we call it continuous threat exposure management. It includes vulnerability management, also includes pen testing, but also M365 and Google Workspace monitoring, as well as some other capabilities. So it's a broader exposure management platform than just vulnerabilities.
Okay. And is it like endpoint based or is it all up in the cloud?
You got it.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a cloud-based platform that utilizes an agent behind the firewall.
Okay.
So we're able to, from our cloud service, scan an external attack surface for any domain and all of its domains and subdomains. Easy peasy. Um, we're also able to scan and analyze your M365, O365 tenants for your clients with our cloud service. But also behind the firewall, we have an agent that scans your client networks, because some of them, of course, have networks, and we scan those. And we also have an agent that goes on endpoint devices for your work from home users as well.
Oh, definitely. That's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of work with like Rapid7 and Qualys in the corporate
Okay.
world.
Yeah.
So this resonates with me. But those things are way expensive, and they're a little unwieldy. So I look forward to testing out your software and seeing what it does.
Awesome.
For
Yeah.
those of you, the ones who've been longtime listeners to this podcast, I used to be a CISSP, director of security, all that in the corporate world, CISO kind of role, whatever you want to call us. And I did it for critical infrastructure, which was really stressful, and also just a lot of freaking paperwork.
Yeah.
And one of those things was understanding risk analysis, where
Right.
my threats were, and being able to order them and say, here's the order we need to go, and hand them off to the IT department so they could patch or
You got
resolve.
it.
And then they had to prove to me it was done.
And
So,
that,
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
That's, I mean, I also lived in that world of enterprise, and you're right, there was a vulnerability management team, right? And that team was responsible for saying, these are the vulnerabilities you need to patch and do it ASAP, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
they actually didn't have hands on the controls, right? So they had to pass it off to the IT ops team, which had a different VP, right?
Yeah.
And therein, there was
Separation
a
of
lot of,
duties.
yeah, it was also politics, and you had business owners that would then weigh in and say, no, you're not patching this server. We need it for revenue, right?
Yep.
Um, in our world now, Adam, our people are everything, right? So they're responsible for not only managing the networks, but making sure that these networks don't have big security exposures that bad guys can get through, and fixing them, right? So there's not like, oh, let's have a vulnerability management team in an IT ops team. That'd be nice, but that's just not the reality of most managed service providers.
Yeah. And it is a different game out here, right? I mean, I had the luxury of having, we were the dedicated security team and vulnerability management and strategy. I didn't have to patch. I wasn't wearing both hats. Whereas here in the MSP world, often the person who finds a vulnerability and the person remediating are the same person.
That's
And
right.
these small businesses cannot afford to have two teams. And so what's really nice is, I know it's not best practice for the person who finds the flaw and to fix the flaw, because then how do you how do you know it was fixed? But the idea being, like, if you can get an MSP who can understand even a cursory vulnerability management, but
Yep.
then be well versed in mitigation and blue team activities,
Right.
you can have a great experience for a small business who could not afford the full corporate suite. I think it's one of my biggest complaints about the small business security world is that the IT security firms are like, no, 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 you need a full suite, you need a full pen test. That's not a real pen test. You need to have
Right.
this and this and this. Like, I tell you what, I came from critical infrastructure. I'll tell you what a real pen test is.
Exactly.
And most of what you guys are doing out there, not touching what we did.
That's right.
I mean,
Yeah.
when you're doing an entire war game scenarios
Yeah.
with multiple entities involved,
Did you war game? Did you war game your EDR, bringing down all your Windows machines?
no, the last war game I did was drone strikes on substations.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good
Because
one.
you double the cybersecurity attack with the physical attack.
Right.
That was
Also real. Also a real
almost a
scenario.
decade ago was that war game. So
Yeah. Hey, you touched on a couple of points I want to revisit. One is, in your last job, you were the security expert. More importantly, you had security experts on your team that could not only find the vulnerabilities, but research them, understand them, know what to do with them, prioritize them, right?
mhm.
The MSPs, by and large, don't have those subject matter experts in cybersecurity. In fact, oftentimes, when it comes to cybersecurity, they're saying, hey, we'll outsource that to an MDR, which, by the way, is additional cost for your client and low margin for you, the MSP. Not that you don't need an MDR. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that security expertise is oftentimes outsourced to a third party. And our proposition is, at least when it comes to securing your networks, it doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
So we built the ThreatMate platform for managed service providers, for IT operators, the guys in the trenches who know how to fix stuff, right? And so that's I just wanted to be clear. One of the big differences between some of those legacy platforms you mentioned earlier is they presume, A, there's a team on the other side of the console, not a person, and B, that they have subject matter experts. And as a result, when you use a vulnerability scanner, you're getting a long list of vulnerabilities. And Adam, you know what I'm talking about. It's more than you can shake a stick at. And in fact, it's nothing, in my opinion, but bad news. So you're talking about overworked IT teams dealing with, oh, I can't get into my account. I need to reset my password, to the printer's broken, to everything else. Now you're going to dump, a couple of thousand of vulnerabilities that they need to sort through and patch. No way, not going to happen, right, in the MSP world. So what we've done with the ThreatMate platform is, first, we find all those same vulnerabilities, so there's no loss in fidelity there. But we take them and we do math on them. So essentially, we generate solutions using generative AI, but then more importantly, we actually put that through a machine learning algorithm. And what that does is really important. It takes all of these solutions and it says, oh, wow, I can actually wipe out a large number of these vulnerabilities with this one fix, right? And that's, so an easy example of that would be, you've got an older Windows box. It probably has a couple hundred vulnerabilities, right? We know the fix. The fix is to upgrade the box to a later or latest version of the Windows operating system. And so if you were to look at all 200 of these vulnerabilities, it would all have the same solution. So that's what the machine learning does. It uses that property and says, okay, I know how to collapse all these vulnerabilities into a single solution.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it does all that work that sort of these vulnerability teams do automatically. The other really important thing is we don't waste your time, because time is valuable and time is cost. And we should revisit high margin security services. So we're very cognizant that we can't be wasting time. And so we look at every vulnerability or exposure, because they're not just vulnerabilities, and we apply threat intelligence, open source threat intelligence to each. And we use that to say, you can ignore these vulnerabilities because they're not being exploited today. In the last
and I want to point out to the MSPs that are listening here and some of the businesses that are listening is that, for valuable KPIs, like when I worked in corporate, we would have like 300,000 to 400,000 vulnerabilities that had to spread out across 50 teams for remediation. I had to build pivot tables to do this. Now we would patch something. We really didn't. We could see that we were doing so much patching that we couldn't attribute anything to a single patch. We say, oh yeah, vulnerabilities went down by 75,000 last month, and we just kept working on it. Now with a small,
by the way, this
business,
is one organization you're talking about, right?
One
large organization, but one, just to give people a feeling for the scale of what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, that was one organization.
Yeah.
And so I built the master of all pivot tables, and I talk about this all the time. It was horrible. It was terrible to look at. It took forever to load. It was pulling a CSV from SharePoint, which is dumped into from I think it was Rapid7 or Qualys. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And it was a pain, but it got the job done. But we can never say like, hey, I patched this Microsoft patch and it fixed 30,000 of those vulnerabilities. So in a small business world, when you're reporting to your client, when you're doing your QBRs, your TBRs, or whatever, instead of reporting on the number of tickets closed, you can say now, hey, we patched and we closed 10,000 vulnerabilities, or we closed, in this case, we closed 300 vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to do anything. We took care of it for you. We detected it. That's high value these days, especially when your clients see things like the CrowdStrike outage, or they see other organizations getting attacked. They see bank fraud. They see all these things hitting the news headlines, and they don't want it to be them. You say, hey, look, we have that taken care of. Just so you know, we closed 600 vulnerabilities last month. A lot of them were level 1s, but we had 3 level 3s and 1 level 5 that we took care of. Just wanted to let you know we got that for you. You're constantly coming out, and having that ability to say, hey, I need to upgrade to Windows 11 or Windows 12 or whatever the next version is.
Right.
And your client goes, we can wait. And when you can put out there and say, this will kill 2,000 vulnerabilities, and like maybe 50 of which are category 5s.
Right.
You'd be like, oh yeah, let's do that migration.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right on that's.
I'm always right. You don't have to say it though, but it's nice to hear.
Well, when we talk about our target for this podcast and the people that we sell to, their clients, frankly, are not that sophisticated. And so we simplify it even further. And so if as a managed service provider, if you go to your client and say, hey, we closed 500 vulnerabilities or patched, the system to eliminate 500 CVEs, they would say, why did you do that? Did I pay for that? Right? Like, so we actually avoid that conversation by using scores, right? And so what we actually do is we have a score for each client, and it's a security score. And the score is from 0 to 100, and it goes down the more security exposures you have. And then by the way, I didn't mention this. So when we're done with the math part, we come out with a set of mission plans. And so instead of working in CVEs, you work in mission plans. And so the mission plans just tell you what to do. It says upgrade these OSs, upgrade Chrome, patch this application, patch this library on this Linux server. because that's your maximum risk right there. That one library contributes most of your risk today because it's being actively exploited in the wild, and that's an internet-facing server, just to give you an example, right?
Yeah.
So that's your mission plan, right? Well, we asked you to execute your mission plan in order of risk priority, because if we assume you only have maybe one thing you can do today on this client, this is the one thing to do, and it's going to decrease your risk by this much and raise your score by that much. And so when you have your QBR or monthly business review with your client, instead of saying, hey, I patched 500 vulnerabilities, what you're going to say is, hey, last month your score was at a 45. We took a bunch of actions to secure your network. You're now up to a 65. By the way, our metric for your industry is 72 is the median. So here's what we're going to do over the next month when we come back to it. So you can kind of give them this graph that shows, here's what I did for you lately to improve the security of your network. That's all they really care about. They don't care that it was a CVE. They don't care it was an expired SSL certificate, right? Or that you blocked the RDP port that they were advertising to the internet, right? All those things introduce security risks, but that's essentially what we find and give you the mission plan to.
Yeah, we do something similar. We have what we call our ITCQ score, and it's been very successful, and it shows out of 100%, where are you? Or hey, you're scoring 75 out of 100%. And then we're also moving away from that a bit to do what you're talking about, like just a general score. How many points are you scoring?
Right.
In total. So we have like a smart rules that's coming out here over the next month. We're looking for testers and people to give us feedback. So if you get to a trial within the next like week or so, you'll get to have feedback on that beta where we sit here and say, here's the finding. Here is how much it was worth. You can assign that. And then here's the total value. And the reason why we do that is because the human mind gets overwhelmed by all the data we're giving them, especially in IT. We love to give people data and KPIs. By giving them a single number to focus on, you're simplifying their decision-making process. So when they see they're scoring 1,200 out of a total of 1,800, or when they see they're at a 75%, be like, hey, you know what? Your competitors and the rest of the market are sitting around 80. Yeah. And here's how we can get you that last 5% or that last 100 points.
Right.
And that way, you're at least doing your due diligence.
Absolutely.
And that makes the conversation so much easier for the client. Whether you're talking about project management, which is what we do, or talking about security services, which is what you do. And that way the client goes, oh, I can make a decision on that. That's easy.
And we come up with a single score, but that score is composed of individual scores for every attack surface. Right. So we look at a network as a set or series of attack surfaces. So I've mentioned the exterior one. I also mentioned the cloud, right? So that's another attack surface. It's quite a big one, actually. Mm-hmm. And then you've got another attack surface behind the firewall, right? Your office network. Some people have data centers. Some people have cloud compute and storage in the cloud. Those are other attack surfaces, right? And then endpoints. So each one of these is an attack surface that, again, looking at from an adversarial point of view, there are they're rich opportunities typically to go exploit. So we score every attack surface. So when you get your executive report, you see the top number, and then you see the breakdown. Oh, here's what your cloud instance looks like. You've got 5 users without MFA enabled, right? So we're going to go ahead and enable MFA in those 5, and your score goes up by that much, right? On that particular surface.
And there's a nice like risk reward there, right? So your client gets to see momentum instantly. Like, hey, if you let us just enable MFA on these last 5 users, we can improve your score by this much. They can understand that. If you say, hey, we need to put MFA on these 5 users because it's best practice, and CVE, blah, 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 or RFP, blah, 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 and you start rattling off all your TLAs, your 3-letter acronyms, the customer's going to be like, but in the meantime, in the back of their head, they're just overwhelmed.
Right.
Whereas score, we call we in the corporate world, we call that manager porn, right? It's a shiny bar that
Right.
is so high level. It looks pretty, and there's
Yeah.
so much going on beneath it that you
Yeah.
don't really know. But this is very rewarding to watch that bar go 1,
Right.
2, and you see people like watch your online ads, watch those satisfying reels that people love to watch,
Oh,
where people are like smoothing over something like concrete, and people are addicted to watching these things. Why? Because it's basically visual porn.
yeah.
And you
Right.
want to do that with your own KPIs when you're talking to
Right.
customers. You want to give them meaningful ones that are important. Don't just give them things that don't matter. Go and give them some meaningful ones that are going to allow them to see what is going on and have that visual feedback of something that's really important. And they can do, oh my gosh, that feels so much better. Those
Yeah.
points are moving up. I'm moving forward in the right direction.
Well, honestly, this background is doing it for me. I am very much in a Zen moment with this background. But
I caught some good fish that day.
that's awesome. To put it simply, know your audience, right?
Yeah.
Because some of the more technical members will get frustrated with a single score, and so you want to be able to give them the ability to double click and say, okay, how did you come up with this 86? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Well, let's flip the page, right? And now you can see for each individual attack surface why that score for that attack surface isn't 100, but more importantly, the actions you can take to raise your score. And we lay it out. We say, look, if you patch these applications, your score is going to go up by 6 points, right? Because that's risk, right? And here's your risk mitigating action. I think at the end of the day, people they don't want to be bothered by vulnerabilities. They just want to fix and go about their business, but know that you have their back. Right?
Yes.
So I think that's it. I think let's keep it simple.
Yeah. And I think it's a great way to wrap up this first episode. And we'll try to record a second one here where we can talk through more of what does this mean at scale? What does it mean for having a definition for this particular service? And keep it simple is your big takeaway from this one. How to offer high margin security services without being an expert. Don't try to be the expert. Keep it simple. There's a lot out there that you can leverage with ThreatMate and help them understand where they need to be, because you already know the blue team activities. You know how to fix things. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. And you will be able to help them make the world a little bit better and a little bit safer. Thanks, Anup, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Adam.